So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
Small off-duty Czechoslovakian traffic warden.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
I am known as Bubbawheat. Not the Bubbawheat, not first name Bubba, last name Wheat, just Bubbawheat. This season is Red Who, where I'm covering British sci-fi like Red Dwarf and Doctor Who. And joining me 3 million years in the future via the TARDIS is my guest, Jon Parker. How are you doing today?
Hello, thank you for having me on your show again. How many times is this now? 2, 3?
I couldn't.
4, 5, I don't know.
It's been a few times, for sure.
Always a pleasure. And to talk about one of my favourite shows of all time.
Yeah, this has been a fun season, and it's, it shouldn't surprise me, but I've had so many British guests this season, which, I mean, it makes sense, but it's still...
I should hope you would,
Yeah, exactly. It's like practically every British person I know that does podcasting I've had on.
Good. You're doing it proper. You're doing it right.
But this week we are talking about Fathers and Sons, which is the second episode of Series 10 of Red Dwarf, and it originally released on October 11th, 2012. So this was, part of the new series. This was the first, first kind of regular series after doing the Back to Earth special, and this is Red Dwarf was airing on Dave now, and so this is kind of like the new era. I feel like a lot of people, a lot of fans of Red Dwarf, they kind of split the show into 2 eras, sometimes even 3, but at least like 2 eras. There's like the BBC era and then the Dave era.
Oh, definitely.
And kind of with that split point right there, it's Back to Earth.
Yeah, it's interesting because the original run. It's one of the greatest things of all time. I've seen every episode 850 million times. The Dave stuff, I have only seen once each when they aired, and I've never really watched them again. So it was actually quite good to see one of these episodes for a second time.
Yeah. So I mean, speaking of your history, watching those a million times, when did you first discover Red Dwarf? What's your history with the show?
Well, for me, because I was born in 86, right? So it was kind of always there, and it is as big here as you might, well, maybe not these days, but back then, at least when I was a kid, it was the biggest thing. Like all the weird, nerdy sci-fi kids who played video games and stuff, we love Red Dwarf. That's what so it was always there. I think I first consciously saw it. My parents probably sat me in front of it when I was like 5 or something. Here, watch this. You'll like this. It's spaceships, And I just immediately was like this. I just connected to it right away. Obviously, when I'm a little kid, I don't understand all the jokes, but then you grow with it and you start to understand a lot of the references you weren't getting. Because as a kid, you just think, oh, it's a funny slob in space. That's good, isn't it? Isn't that hilarious? Which it is.
Yeah, it's the odd couple in space.
Yeah, but then, when you understand media more, you appreciate more of the show, I think, and get into it. I think maybe, though, because I was a little younger, I did like... A lot of people went off the series when it got a bit more, I'm going to say sci-fi, actually, a bit more serious with the sci-fi. Like, there's the episode where they time travel and they do the whole JFK thing.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this is one of the greatest things I've ever seen in my life. Older people were like, nah, I'm not into it anymore. Because they just wanted it to stay the same, which I understand. But, then these Dave ones try and go back to what it was like, and that's hit or miss to the fans as well, so, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I was kind of at the right level of fandom that I enjoyed the Dave series, which I've also watched all of those only once. I had, I kind of caught the random episode here and there on PBS, And then I started collecting the DVDs, and I have the first 5 series on DVD. So those are the ones that I'm most familiar with now. And then last year, I did, a start to finish watch, and I think Series 8 was my least favorite, and then I kind of felt that it bounced back, getting into the Dave series. I think there's a lot of fan service, a lot of connections back to some of the old stuff, and just the 6-episode format, I think works for this show.
Yeah, and you're not alone with that about the 8th one as well. I thought it was fine, but most people are like, no, don't even watch it. They're like, oh, it's trash, it's trash. It is a completely different show for one season. It's random.
Yeah, like right before recording this episode, I talked about Pete, the 2-part episode, and that is, I think, my least favorite episode of the entire run.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was still fun to talk about, and it did happen to have, a very brief time loop elements in it, so I think it was the correct episode to cover for that series. But yeah, that was a rough one, and I feel like this, and I watched both of those back to back last night, and going from Pete to Fathers and Son, it's like, oh, this is the right level of humor that I'm expecting. Like, even from kind of the very beginning with Rimmer coming in, like Rimmer's entrance is him saying, do you hear something like this whining noise? And Lister just saying, yeah, it's you're talking.
That was possibly my favorite gag of the whole episode. It was like old school Red Dwarf, that. It was perfect. It's exactly how they used to interact in the first few series of the show.
Yeah, and and I thought that their repetition of that joke, like every time they came back to that, I thought that was, the right, just the right level of comic timing, the right amount of time spent on it. And, compared to Pete, I thought that the timing on a lot of that was just the wrong sort of timing.
Well, that joke alone in this, I have to think either Craig Charles adds stuff to it, or they write specifically with his sort of attitude in mind, because that is exactly a joke people in Liverpool would make. Even if I said to a friend, "What's that whiny noise?" my friend would be like, "It's you." It would happen every time, and you'd be like, "Oh, for God's sake, you've done it again."
Yeah, and I think the other kind of overall thing that I definitely noticed, watching this back to back with Pete, which was filmed, that was 99 and this is 2012, so 13 years difference. I definitely noticed the age difference. That's everyone here definitely aged 13 years.
Yeah. I feel mean noticing it so much, but it's with the new ones, especially because there's been more after this. It's very distracting, especially I'm not body shaming, but Crichton, his suits, they have to keep changing the suits because of his body. It's it doesn't really make sense. But it's Red Dwarf. It doesn't have to make sense at the end of the day. Red Dwarf contradicts itself and does stupid stuff, and it's fine.
Yeah, the Red Dwarf is something that it has continuity whenever it wants to, and then whenever it doesn't want to, it doesn't care a lick about continuity whatsoever.
No, it just absolutely throws it out the window. And people don't even address it. It's like, completely changing Kachansky. Not just the actress, the character is completely different. And they're like, yeah, well, we just changed it because we wanted to.
I mean, it makes sense to a certain extent in that case, because that was alternate universe Kachansky. So
that's just the way around it, isn't it? Like, alternate universe, doesn't matter.
And they've changed time so many times, with White Hole, they completely reversed a section of time, and there's so much timey-wimey stuff going on that, if they wanted to, they could explain it away that, this happened in another adventure, that wasn't an episode.
I think it's always at its strongest as a show when the fact it's sci-fi is secondary. It's a comedy first, and it just happens to be in space. That's a funnier dynamic to me. Whereas if all the jokes are sci-fi jokes. It's not the same. Whereas we can relate to this because okay, they're in space, but they're relatable characters. We all know people like this. We don't know a cat, but we all know a self-absorbed narcissist, and we all know a Dave Lister. As a kid, I wanted to be Dave Lister. I didn't see anything wrong with being a slob, just eating curry and drinking beer. So I was like, brilliant, yeah, great. This should be my life. And he's a punk. He's cool.
Yeah. And the other thing that I did kind of like about this is that they don't shy away too much about them aging. Like one of the plot points is definitely tied to them being older, especially with Lister's cavity. The fact that there's an entire plot point about him needing to get his tooth filled, which definitely feels like an older plot line.
I feel his pain. I've got the same problem right now. Yeah. But sadly, people always say, oh, the UK is great, healthcare, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but the dental work ain't included in that. So I have been trying to get it sorted for years, literally years, and I can't get a dentist.
I mean, that's always kind of been a joke, for a long time as well. I mean, the Simpsons had the Great Book of British Smiles.
And that's where it comes from, I think, is because we've got the healthcare. It's not technically free. It's included in your taxes, but it's a very low price. Nothing to do with teeth. So people just go, well, I can't afford it, so I'm not doing it. So we end up, we can go on for a long time like Lister here, trying our best. Just have some booze, it'll be fine. You'll get through it.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing that is kind of, I think, unique to this episode is that this is almost like a sequel to Ouroboros, where Lister discovers that he's his own father, which is, taking the Futurama Fry as his own grandfather one step further.
Yeah. I loved that, because I'd forgotten all about this episode, to be honest. Rewatching it, as soon as I realised that's where it was going, calling back to one of the best parts of the show, it was like, oh, brilliant, yeah, bring that up again. Because it's amazing, and I love that Red Dwarf gets away with this, that this isn't talked about more. You think this would come up all the time, like, what the hell? But they just go, well, we'll mention it when we want to mention it, I guess.
And I think that him talking about that is another, like, some of the best comedy moments, that they really milk that for all it's worth, but I love it every time they do it. Like, from his initial explanation about, I write myself a Father's Day card every year, and then I get so drunk that I forget about it, and then I hand it to Crichton, who delivers it to me the next year on Father's Day, and then cue Crichton coming in with the Father's Day card that he wrote last year that has the dreadlocks on the card too.
I think it's a great idea,
Yeah.
In fact, I think there's nothing wrong with him giving himself a card. Why not? Why not? Because he is his own dad. Okay, let's ignore that. But he just wants to have a nice day, and there's no one else. He can't have a family. There's no other people. So why not? Give yourself a card. Maybe don't get blackout drunk so you forget it, but do it a year in advance, and it will be fresh. You'll go, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's like if I sent myself a card and had it delivered a year later, I don't think I would remember what I had put on that card.
Exactly, especially if you did it all the time. Like the first time, it might, because it's so novel, you might remember. But then the next year, you'll start like forgetting because it's not special until it turns up, and then it'll be like, Mm-hmm. Although I don't know if I think this is me reading into it right. The dreads on the card, I was trying to think like, is this maybe a little in-joke? Because when I found out, after years of watching the show, that those dreads he has aren't real. They're clipped on, right? I was devastated because I was like, he's got the coolest hair of all time. So I thought maybe it's a little gag of like, they're fake though, so they just, you just stick them on. I'm sure when he was a kid, he had this hair or something, because it seems really personal to him, this guy, because he was a punk. He was famous on our TV before Red Dwarf for being a punk poet. He'd get up and do poetry, about the police beating him up for being black and stuff like this. And it was really cool and confrontational and stuff. So he is a punk, and I could imagine him having this hair, like mixing punk with his, his heritage and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And like he still does do music. Like that's, I kind of feel like he almost does more music than he does acting. Like, based at least on his social media presence, the focus is really his music, and then the acting seems like secondary. Like he'll come back whenever they do another season of Red Dwarf, but then he just goes back to his music.
He's played the band I'm in. He's played our band twice on his radio show.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but he didn't pick them. He had guests on who were picking songs. But I can still say we've been on his show, technically,
Yeah, I mean, you can't beat that.
Exactly. It made my day. Because he might be from Liverpool, but you don't see him here very much. Because he's like in London and Manchester and stuff. So it's just nice to have that connection. Like, oh yeah, local legend. We're on the show. Although they beeped our songs both times, BBC. One of them wasn't even a swear word. I'm sure that wasn't Craig's doing. He'd allow it.
Probably. And then we got the Medibot, which I think this is interesting, but also kind of a little weird because this feels very different from Red Dwarf to have this Medibot, this actor playing like almost kind of a Holly, but a more lively and comedic, and it definitely seems like they use like a digital effect to exaggerate his, like, especially his eyes, kind of like fisheye lens at points to make him look extra weird.
It was odd, the visuals of that. And I thought, when I was watching it, I was like, oh, that's an English person doing like an American accent or something. It's not. The guy's from like Canada or something. And I was like, what? Why is the accent so strange? I don't know. It seems like a comedy version of a North American accent.
Yeah, it's almost like, not quite Asian, because the same actor does do the Taiwan Tony vending machine.
Yeah, that's not my favorite part of the episode. Is I know what they're going for, but I think just get like a Chinese guy to do it, because it's a bit. It's veering, but then again, you could actually argue they're deliberately doing that because of what the conversation is about.
Right. It's like they're putting a hat on it, but at the same time, they're participating in the racism of this discussion of Chinese whispers. Which I never heard it, like in the U.S., at least in my area, that it was always just referred to as telephone. Like that's the game, and I heard that it was... I forget where, like maybe the first time I watched this, I read that it was more common in the UK that it's called Chinese whispers.
Yeah. I actually only found out you guys had a different name for it when I was a guest on a different podcast and it came up in conversation. We just call it Chinese whispers. That's all I know it as. But at the same time, I think we're at a stage where people have gone, maybe we shouldn't say that. So I don't know what kids are calling it these days. I'm pretty sure they've been told, try not to do that, because it is a bit, like, it's not necessarily saying anything bad, but just the highlighting the Chinese sort of aspect of it seems a little bit like you're being a bit racist. But then it's a good question in the show. Is it? We need to talk about these things. It very well could be. I don't know the origin of the name. This is the problem, because it's always been a thing.
Yeah, and they do kind of highlight that in the beginning of the conversation. Like, they're saying, "Oh, are you saying that the Chinese are bad at communicating, and that's why?"
Well, see, that could be where it comes from, and that is bad if that's where it comes from. So then we definitely shouldn't be calling it that. But I love the way it does devolve into a game of Chinese whispers, because it keeps getting changed.
Yeah, and it reminds me of, again with the Simpsons references, Purple Monkey Dishwasher.
Oh, that's one of my favorite things ever on The Simpsons. And I can never explain it to people who've not seen it, because it's like, well, how do you make this sound funny? You can't. Just watch the show.
And I even, like, my wife had put on the second Madagascar movie for our younger daughter, and they have a telephone scene in that too, where the penguins are flying a helicopter, and there's a chain of monkeys that are rescuing the Alex the lion, and he gives a message to the bottom monkey, and then they telephone it up the chain, and then it comes something different. Like it's like I think it's like they're going towards a dam, and they're like, pull up, we don't want to die here, and then it goes up the chain, and they're like, sacrifice us, and we're okay with dying here.
Oh, that's great. I mean, not as good as Chinese whiskers, but still.
And then what was the last one? Like some knickerbuckles.
Oh yeah. It was, what was it? It was something to do with, it's like supporting Chinese knickers. And Crichton takes everything very seriously, of course. So he's actually like, oh yes, I could see that. So
yeah, and I definitely noticed that Crichton's makeup, I know you mentioned it earlier, that it does look so different. Like,
his face is so different in this one, isn't it?
Yeah.
It was wild to me. Like, even after this, the later ones, I think they've got it better again. But there's something off in this one.
Mm-hmm. It almost made me think that, it doesn't even look like Robert Llewellyn, even though, the voice sounds like him, but especially like the front view of his face, I think especially looks really off. And then like whenever you see him in profile, it looks a bit better, but the front view just really looks off.
There's something, I think specifically, the nose is part of the problem.
Yeah.
That doesn't look like his nose has ever looked in any of the other... I'm assuming they redeveloped it, because he apparently just hates getting in the suit. Like, he loves playing the character, but he's like, it's a nightmare. So I'm assuming they made some changes to make it easier to come back, and it wasn't quite right. A bit like Star Wars bringing Yoda back in the prequels. It's like, it doesn't look right, though. That's a very different puppet. I'm sorry. But there's a few things in this that are, like, Rimmer's hair, there's something weird going on with that hair. That's not right. It's wavy, but it doesn't look like a nice wave, like a sort of old school 50s, 60s thing. It looks like he had it done like that, and then it all got messed up at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we have this, this kind of B plot of Pre, them installing a new computer that they got from a derelict, and I think this is another just fantastic Chris Berry performance, with him saying, with Crichton saying, it can be, male or female, and Rimmer's like, oh, it doesn't matter, female. And
I was dying at this. This was my other favorite gag. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so great, and early 20s, mid 50s, late 60s. Oh, just anything, whatever you want. Early 20s.
It was. When they're talking about the breast size.
Yeah. And it's even funnier too, because it is like always just a head. You never even see anything below the shoulders.
That actually cracked me up more, because you'd think as soon as she pops up, there'll be an obvious cleavage. They're like, no, we're not going to show you that though. Maybe Rimmer can see that privately, being a machine himself. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what the other monitors are for.
Yeah,
for the
maybe.
rest of the body.
I loved this actually, but I loved it so much. It's a double-edged sword. I was a bit disappointed in that. I think you could do a whole episode with this woman. I think it doesn't go far enough with her. You could do loads, but then you kind of have had a similar thing in older.
I think was it Cassandra?
Oh, Cassandra. Yeah, there's been a few times where they've had another computer who isn't necessarily evil, but is an efficient AI, which is not what they want. They want Holly.
Cassandra was the one that they found on the other ship that could predict the future.
Yeah. And this is kind of where AI is going these days. It's worrying. Predictive messages when you send an email. It's like, oh, are you saying this? You're like, whoa, hold on.
Yeah, I didn't look farther into it, but I saw a headline which, may or may not be satire, that said that there is an AI system that can predict crime with 90% accuracy.
Oh my God, no, Minority Report. That movie showed that it's a bad idea. Did you not watch the movie?
Yeah, and I did want to kind of call out that Pri is played by Rebecca Blackstone, which I think it's interesting. I was like looking at her IMDb, and she hasn't done a whole lot. She's primarily a video game voice actress. Kind of surprisingly to me, like she's done a voice in Guitar Hero Live, Fatal Frame, Maiden of Blackwater, which that's actually a game that I have played, and Ni no Kuni 2.
Ni no Kuni's great. I love Ni no Kuni. I haven't played that Fatal Frame, but I've played the earlier ones. So yeah, I love this. I mean, the first two were great. I'll have to try this one.
Yeah, I love the second one. The Maiden of Blackwater, it's all right. I haven't spent a ton of time in it. It does have like kind of a similar feeling. It is a little bit frustrating, but it's also, part of the game because it has like I think it was like Resident Evil 2, the slow walking speed.
Yeah. Very slow. I remember that. Even as a kid playing that, I was like, God, speed up, go! And then you have to control it like a tank, don't you? So you're like trying like oh God. Yeah, stress. I'm actually surprised they never made a Red Dwarf game. I think you could have done it with like Telltale. That would have been good.
Yeah, I think they did like one game, but it wasn't very good, and it wasn't like very Red Dwarf. And there's been, I think, a couple fan-made games that I've seen.
Maybe that's for the best in a way that it's fan-made, because what I love about Red Dwarf, and I think a lot of games wouldn't get it right, is that as much as it's one of my favorite programs ever, it's cheap. Right? It looks kind of crap, and that's part of the charm. Which I think the later ones lose a little bit, where they bring in some CGI and stuff, which is fine. But I like the early ones where it's clearly they've just made it out of cheap models they found laying around because the BBC only gave them £20 to make it.
Like Doctor Who leftovers.
Exactly, like Doctor Who. And I think Doctor Who's at its best when it's cheap as well, and they're just trying like, well, what do we do with this tiny budget? Whereas now it's overblown. It's like, okay. I think maybe a game by the company Telltale would get it right. I think they.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the aesthetic would work well with like a classic like point and click adventure, like the Broken Sword type game, or like the old Discworld game.
Oh, absolutely! Last year I was on a kick of just playing those games. I was just playing loads and loads and loads. That would work perfectly. Monkey Island, it's kind of got similar humor to a Red Dwarf, Get those guys on. LucasArts, I don't know what they're called now. I don't think they're called that.
Yeah, and then like back to this episode, we have again kind of the great setup of Lister waking up in the shopping cart with the traffic cone behind him, and then this futuristic VHS tape.
See, that again, look, that's what I love. It's cheap. Because when they started the show, that's just what they had laying around. So they used them. And now that the show's still going, they've got to keep it because that's the tech. There's been no one to make more tech unless they meet elves, So they have to keep VHS tapes in it. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and this is just another great gag with him watching his yesterday self getting drunk and just absolutely pounding shots during this whole thing. And the whole gag of he's like, okay, I need to give you some tough love, so you need to turn this off and go fix your teeth and enroll in the engineering program. And then he just skips to the next one, and he's like, oh, so, all right, so you got your teeth done. No, I know you. You just skipped to the next tape.
I loved it. It's one of those things that the longer it went on, the funnier it got as well. Because it kept happening, didn't it? It kept going, no, I know you haven't done it. I know you've skipped ahead.
And then it's the stakes build, too, because he's like, okay, if you don't do it this time, I'm going to throw your guitar out the airlock. And then you have him looking behind him and seeing the guitar there. And then he's like, okay, go walk over to your guitar. And then he goes, and it's just a cardboard cutout.
That killed me as well because I didn't see it coming. I thought that was just a guitar. It looked maybe they switched it out for the gag. I don't know, but it looked legit.
Yeah.
And what does he say? He's like, you see that tiny speck, floating out there? That's your guitar.
Yeah, half a light year away.
Devastated. That's his prized possession.
Yeah. I mean, so much that he cut out the back of the camphor wood trunk of Rimmer.
That's a classic as well. That's what I always think about.
Yeah. And then we jump back to the B plot with Pre. And I kind of love this setup too. That's Pre used her predictive abilities, and when she repaired everything on B deck, she repaired it as Rimmer would have repaired it, and so everything's just done half-assed. And it's just wires everywhere, no regard to safety, because that's how Rimmer would have done it.
Exactly. She is good at her job technically. Because she doesn't want to destroy the ambience and everything.
And then, I think I just kind of realized that in, the last Red Dwarf episode that I talked about, I don't think we barely talked about Cat at all, which, I mean, that's kind of true because Cat, and I've referred to him before as this, is just like an agent of chaos.
Yeah,
and
like
I think
a cat.
Exactly. And I think that's really very true in this episode specifically, because his main scene, like his only really prominent scene in this, is whenever Lister finally does go to get his tooth fixed, and Cat is there ahead of him in the medibay because there's only one tank of anesthetic left, or anesthesia, and he's like, well, I'm going to get it. I don't need it right now, but you never know when you might need it. And Lister's like, well, I need it now. It's like, well, you should have thought of that. That's why you plan ahead.
You gotta think ahead. It's cat logic. It is how they operate. And that's what I love about the character. He's not evil or anything, but he's very selfish, and he doesn't see anything wrong with that. He's like, well, why shouldn't I have it? I got here first. If you got here first, you could have it. But you didn't. I got here. And it makes him a very interesting character, because that's an awful thing to do to someone, but you still love him, and they still love him. Anytime, though, that they think, oh, you're our friend, right? He's like, well,
I like to think of you as people I know.
Yeah. You're like, yeah. Acquaintances, that we live in proximity to one another. Kind of cat behavior. Yeah,
and then we get another scene of Lister finally interacting with Pre, and him. Yeah, this is another moment where this kind of sets off the climax of the third act, where Lister, being Dad Lister, had resigned from from JMC in order to force Son Lister, which is the same Lister.
Oh, I love him trying to explain that multiple times. Like, no, well, it is me, but it's not me. But we are the same person.
Yes, it's such a great moment, and Craig Charles just completely nails it. I think it's just so great the way he does it, because it's like you can tell that he completely understands what he's saying, but it makes no sense. But it makes perfect sense at the same time.
It's one of those things. It's like, yeah, okay. He's like, I know it's crazy, but trust me on this. This is the explanation, and nobody can fathom it. I mean, even Pre seems like, what? And she's a supercomputer.
Yeah, I almost feel like what they should have done to solve Pre's conundrum is that Lister would have done something that she couldn't have predicted, just because Lister his personality itself is unpredictable.
Because he's not like anyone else. He's Lister. He's one of one.
But I do like how they, solve that problem. And, the problem starts here because he's resigned, and so he's no longer a crew member. And since he was the only, and so, his supply of oxygen is, his supply of free oxygen is about to run out. And so he has to get in a spacesuit and go out the airlock. And once he's off board, there is no living member of the crew on board Red Dwarf anymore. So Pre decides that the logical conclusion is to dismantle the ship, and the easiest way to do that is to drive it into the sun.
I mean, I understand. There's no hope of them ever getting back. So, from a logical computer standpoint, you've got to take it out. It's a bit like detonating the ship. I assume that's what she was going to say. We're going to self-destruct, but it was more interesting to fly into a sun. I found that more novel. You get 2 brilliant lines this whole sequence as well, because Lister comes out with one of the greats where he goes, "Oh, I really need oxygen. It's really important to my lifestyle." My lifestyle. And also when he gets flushed out the airlock and he's floating away. What is it they say? They go like that looks like a man, a man in a suit, floating through space. And they go, "That's not a man. That's Lister."
Yeah, and then we kind of get some more dialogue with Pre and the whole climax, and these great it doesn't make any sense as to what they're supposed to be used for. I think early in the episode, Crichton just waves at one of them and calls it a garbage truck or a garbage bot, but it's basically like a forklift. It's like a giant forklift with spikes on the front.
Yeah, what do you think it's for? My only thing I could think of is like a garbage masher thing, like in Star Wars,
Mm-hmm.
Like, do 2 of them get the trash and smush together, and that compacts it, I guess?
Your guess is as good as mine. And then, I mean, because that is kind of how the end of the episode goes. There is 2 of them kind of slowly crushing each other, although it is, paced for sitcom reasons, because the speed that they're going as they're driving down the hall is much faster than, as they're slowly trying to crush everybody. And, they would have been crushed realistically in about 5 seconds, but the scene goes on for 2 minutes because it has to.
That's the answer right there, because it has to. That's why they did it. Well, it's for the gag. We've got to get, this is for the story. Doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense. It's Red Dwarf. Accept it.
And then the solution they come up with is, very smart, and it's nicely set up earlier on, because Lister was talking to the Medibot earlier about how he's his own son, and so he opens up a medical file for himself as Dave Lister Jr.
Yeah.
And so he uses the existence of that medical file to convince Pre that he is his own son. And so that way that there is now that he's a descendant of the crew member, and so he's allowed to stay on board.
That was a really clever way out of it, I thought. Because sometimes the solution is, sometimes it's kind of stupid, and that's fine. But in this, it was actually quite smart. I didn't see it coming. I didn't realize they were going to go back to that bit at the beginning. I just thought that was a throwaway random moment, but no, they're clever. They thought of everything.
Yeah, and then we end on an up note where he gets the care package that descendants of crew members get, with the champagne and the zero-G video game.
Yeah. I like the way he's playing video games a couple of times in this episode, which is interesting because he doesn't throughout most of the show. Usually if there's a video game, it's like one of the, what is it they call it? Like those games you go into.
Better Than Life.
Better Than Life, that's the one. Better Than Life. Usually it's things like that.
Total immersion.
Yeah, but in this it's like, no, they're like video games, like I play. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And then that ends the episode, and it's, I think that this is, maybe not 100% return to form to the earlier series. I mean, I think time will tell if as the years go by, because I think some of the resistance to these episodes is just the fact that they're newer, and so people haven't had time to watch them over and over again, because I think repetition breeds familiarity, breeds the nostalgia, and it hasn't had enough time. And like practically everyone that I've talked to has the same experience with the Dave era of Red Dwarf, that they've seen it once.
Yeah, and rewatching it here, I actually felt like this was quite close to the older stuff, really, in style and substance. It wasn't worlds apart. Like some people are like, oh, it's completely trash, blah, blah, blah. It really wasn't. It was better than an episode of Series 8, as you said. So I don't see the problem.
It's pretty self-contained. It's kind of follows the format of the earlier series. The only additional characters is the two computers and then the vending machines, and the vending machines are just kind of they only have like one or two lines, and the Medibot is just kind of just purpose built. He is a character, but he's not really a character.
That's what's great with Red Dwarf, that you can get away with introducing new characters, like new computers and stuff, because the ship's so big. The gag is always like, they haven't even seen half of it. So, throughout the whole series, they've maybe explored 30% of the ship.
Yeah, I think, to put it in perspective, the USS Enterprise could dock in the docking bay of Red Dwarf. I think the Enterprise is maybe, 10 times bigger than Starbug.
Yeah.
And Starbug is like tiny compared to Red Dwarf. Red Dwarf is like the size of Manhattan.
It's such a good thing to put in as a writer, because that way you can just introduce anything you want, and you've got an explanation right there. You go, well, it was just a part of the ship they didn't go to before. That Medibot was always there. You're like, okay, fine.
Yeah. Even though you do have some people saying, like, why, if the ship is that big and they have all this room to explore, why do they spend 95% of their time in their bunk?
I think that's what I like about the show, though. It's this, future set sci-fi thing, but it's actually, the things they're dealing with are very realistic in a way.
Yeah.
It's about interpersonal things.
Because they are working class.
Yeah. And it's
it's
said,
hard
an odd
to be
couple.
working class if you raid the captain's quarters and get all the luxuries, because then it's like them living in luxury.
Yeah.
Here it's still, they still have to follow the rules and regulations of JMC and their station, so they still have to, even though there's no one else there, and technically they're, in a way, Lister is kind of the captain, because he's the only human left on board, even though Rimmer technically outranks him. So I think that's like the weird loophole that, Rimmer barely outranks him, but he's a hologram.
Yeah, he's dead. It's genius. In fact, it's quite interesting how the show often deals with the ideas of like Lister not doing anything with his life. Because on the surface you'd go, well, what's he gonna do with his life? There's nothing to live for, really. So it's about finding meaning where there is none. And I find that quite relatable. This guy, what's the point in him becoming an officer or whatever, or doing the engineering program, or, any of these things? What's the point? There isn't a point. It's for himself. And I quite like that. It's quite nice. He's not doing it he's not going to get any money. It's just to improve himself. That's why he wants to do it. He probably will never do it, but,
Yeah, even though, there is that moment where, we kind of skipped over that element of that plot device. I did mention that Lister, as Dad Lister, he resigned, and he did that in order to force Son Lister, who's the same person, but they're different.
They're different. Crucial.
But he did that to force Son Lister to have to re-enroll. Like, in order to re-enroll, he would have to take the engineer's exam. But then the thing that he didn't realize that Pre points out, which doesn't really make sense, but she says that you have to be younger than 21 years old in order to take that.
Maybe it's a funding thing, because it's like a graduate program or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's cool. And I love the thing with the Dad Lister. I quite liked was I don't know, again, I might be reading too much into this, but it felt like it was maybe addressing fears of becoming our father. You know, because he doesn't want to be a father. He wants to be cool, punk Lister, yeah, party guy. But Dad Lister, he's cracking down. He's being a father, and it felt a bit like
and Lister is a
scared of it.
character. He's the only character in history, I think, that he literally became his own father.
Yeah. And he's having to treat himself like a child. He's like, no, I've got to whip you into shape, boy. It's great, and I think it is sort of dealing with that internal thing of I don't want to be like my dad, but you will become you will,
because you are your dad.
Because you are your dad,
but you're the same person. All right, that's all I got for this episode. Do you have anything else for this episode, or for Red Dwarf in general, that you want to talk about?
No, I mean, I could talk about it for far too long, so don't you worry, don't worry. But thank you for having me on, because I just love this program so much, and I really appreciated going back to the Dave ones. And just getting to see the guys again. That's the thing, right? Bad Red Dwarf, like, this isn't a bad one, but some people don't like the new ones. That's fine. To me, Bad Red Dwarf is still better than No Red Dwarf. It's all good. I just love being with the guys. So even what was the episode you mentioned before that you didn't like? I'll still watch it, because it's still Red Dwarf. I'm still getting to see the boys.
Yeah,
it's exciting.
I definitely, I rolled my eyes at some points during Pete, but I think overall I still enjoyed watching it. I still thought it was fun, and like you said, that it's fun to watch these guys again, like, no matter what adventure they're in.
Exactly. Like, they could just keep doing them until they die. I don't care. Some people are like, oh, it's sad they're older. It's like, no, it's not sad. It's real. We all age. And you get idiots going, well, why is Rimmer older, though? I think it's a very clear explanation. He's older because that helps Lister stay sane, which is the whole purpose of his existence. Because if he didn't age, that would be creepy. That'd be weird. That would mess with your head, right? And I just love Chris Barry as well, because I wrote to him once to get an autograph for my ex. I was like, could you send her a Christmas and New Year message with your autograph? And he did. All I gave him was an envelope. I didn't send him cash or anything, So very lovely chap.
Yeah, I joined a Red Dwarf Facebook group recently, as I was kind of starting this season, and I see a whole lot of interactions. Like, a lot of them still do fan conventions, and every every post I see from people attending those fan conventions, it's nothing but praise for how nice those guys are during those conventions and everything.
That's what you like to hear. There's nothing more disappointing than getting like loads of negativity about someone you love.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me and talking about some Red Dwarf. And, why don't you take a moment here and let people know where else you can be found online?
Yeah, sure. I do far too much. I'm ridiculous. If you want to hear more of me for whatever stupid reason, I have multiple podcasts. I have Bat Minute, where we talk about the Batman movies 1 minute at a time. I have Miami Minute, where we talk about the formerly lost 80s classic, sort of, Miami Connection, 1 minute at a time, because we're stupid. And I also have the podcast Hedwig Inch by Angry Inch, talking about the queer rock musical Hedwig and the Angry Inch. So check all of those out, and look up our band, Pete Bentham and the Dinner Ladies. For Americans, a dinner lady is a lunch lady. So I'm a dancing lunch lady in the band.
Yeah, and if you enjoy Bat Minute or Miami Minutes, then stay tuned next week, because next week I will have John's co-host Niall on talking about Doctor Who.
Ooh, that'll be exciting. I'm going to listen to that. I'm definitely. I never listen to anything I'm on. I hate my voice, but I'll listen to Niall, even though I'm sick of hearing him. He invited me round for a drink, and I was like, I can't, Niall. I'm going on a podcast. I'm a star.
And of course, you can find me everywhere. I'm on social media at Bubbawheat these days. I am most active on Threads, so that's the kind of best place to contact me. But if you reach out to me on any social media where you find me, I still have them on my phone, and I will still most likely reply as long as you're saying something nice. And we also have a Facebook group. It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group, and you can join that to discuss episodes of this podcast as they come out. And we also welcome discussions and memes about other time loop movies and TV shows and video games in general. That's all welcome there as well. And until next time, smoke me a kipper and I'll regenerate before breakfast next week.